Johnny, thanks for coming to the Founders Lounge.
Pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me on.
So you built your first company and sold it for 7 figures after, I think, just about 2 years or so, which is quite impressive in itself. So I have a lot of questions around that. And obviously now building your second company, doing some advising on the side, some angel investing. So a lot of interesting topics that we can dive into. But as I usually say, let's just start at the beginning. So the first company that you built, can you tell us a little bit more about what it was to set the
Sure.
stage, to set the context?
So the business was called Pouch, Pouch, and it was a browser extension that you installed, and it automatically found all the best voucher codes on the internet and presented them to you at the checkout page. We didn't come up with it. We saw it in India first, actually. And then we did a bit of research and saw it was doing really well in America, and there was no one doing it in the UK. But now there are like hundreds of copycats. Each market has their own version. Most markets have 2 or 3 versions. They're really like fantastic tools. And we call it luck, call it just going with something we were the first in the UK to launch a browser extension like this. And it wasn't my idea. It was my friend from school, Ben Corrigan. He worked in affiliate marketing technology sales for about 4 years. And the company he worked for did shopping cart abandonment technology. Basically, you install that pixel on your website and it will track the mouse movements and let you know when you're about to abandon the cart. And he was a salesperson selling in this tech to retailers. And the issue was like selling tech, getting integrations, getting the tech team to prioritize it. He was like, if we can do the same thing, but B2C, so get people to install something that, does the same thing, then we can build a pretty big business. And that was the idea from Pouch at the beginning. Serve the best voucher codes, optimize checkouts, help people save money, like pretty true to the vision throughout the whole journey. And we sold it about 2 years after we formally started it, right? No ideas happen overnight. We started talking about it in like 2015, 2 years before the product even went live, over beers and whatever it may be. And then took a long time for things to kind of line up. But at the start of 2017, I left and we went full time on Pouch. And then we exited the business at the start of 2019. And so, some people say, wow, amazing. Sometimes it's like, could we gone a bit longer? We were really young. We were like 25 to 27 doing it. We had never run a business before of any type. So the fact that we managed to build something that people wanted and then sell it was pretty unbelievable, really. Like, there's actually very few exits in startup land. Most people make their money via secondaries and things like that. To actually have sold a company is something I didn't quite appreciate at the time, but very grateful to have gone through that experience. And it was amazing. And you can still download the product. I'm not involved at all anymore, but joinpouch.com, it's still a really, really brilliant tool.
One thing I'll point out that I appreciate, you said we didn't come up with the idea, which I think there are a lot of people who didn't actually say it out loud, but I think it happens very, very, very often. I actually talk about it quite often because there's a lot of stuff that happens. And especially I think the US and China are 2 interesting examples because there's a lot of innovation that happens there that we can and should bring to Europe and to other markets, right? And obviously there are some people that are doing that very openly. Rocket Internet. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how they're doing these days. I haven't actually heard of them in a while.
Funny story that you mentioned them, because the company that bought Pouch was founded under like Rocket's umbrella.
Ah, interesting. Yeah.
So they were looking at voucher code websites doing well in the US and started their own version in Germany. And now this company, Global Savings Group, is the largest like deal and voucher platform. They've got loads of different properties in Europe. They're like a massive, almost $1 billion valuation business. Like definitely one of the standout success stories in Europe.
Yeah, exactly. So that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So Rocket Internet, for those who don't know, is one of those examples. They literally, the whole model is they just observe what's working, I think primarily in the US, and then they replicate that in Europe, I think Middle East and Africa. And they, they clone essentially Uber or Airbnb or like all those kind of big, some of the biggest startups in the US.
I think like HelloFresh, I don't think it was HelloFresh specifically, but definitely they took that D2C grocery model and made it their own. They copied like Blue Apron. And what's interesting is, those companies in America have collapsed, but in Europe, they're doing really well.
That's actually interesting. Yeah, I didn't realize. That's interesting. So yeah, their model obviously works. There's pros and cons to it, but the general idea is, I don't think, there's this whole thing around entrepreneurship. Like, you need to be very, very innovative. You need to create something that never existed before, and I just think that that's so wrong. No, that it's not wrong. It's just very confusing and inaccurate, because all the startups that you see in the media and a lot of the stories they're being told is like, yeah, you need to invent something completely new,
No,
right? And we look at Elon
no.
Musk, with his creating SpaceX and Tesla and that kind of stuff, but the
I
reality
also
is,
think it holds back a lot of founders like
yeah.
themselves
Mm,
because I talk about this openly. Neither of the businesses I've started have been my idea. Like Pouch wasn't
mm,
my idea; it was my
mm,
friends. YASO wasn't my idea; it was two guys I met at a conference and we built a working relationship with. And I think a lot of people get inertia thinking, I don't have an idea, I don't have an idea. Like, I've had lots of ideas, don't get me wrong, but I've just never thought they were good enough. And
yeah.
I know my skill set is one where I want to have a co-founder or two. Both my businesses have been, a three co-founder team because that's the balance of responsibility I think is best. But no, you don't need your own idea, but you need to know what your skill set is. You need to know what your edge is. You need to know what you can bring to the table. So when you meet someone that's, an amazing developer with an idea, you can say, I can handle all of this. This is what I bring
Mm,
to the table. Here's my track record. You take care of all of that, and let's do this thing together.
mm. There's a book that's been recommended to me probably more often than any other. It has a funny title, How to Get Rich by Felix Dennis, and he was a multi millionaire. Well, I think he founded Felix Publishing, which was a like £800,000 company, I think, in the end. Very successful guy financially, right? Built literally an empire of publishing companies, and he
Mm,
wrote a book on how to start a business, or how to run and build a big business. And one of the things that he says in the book that really stuck with me was, you don't need to have a single good idea in your life. If you are just talking to people and keep your eyes open, and if you just become good at executing, you're going to be much, much, much more successful than the person who has 100 ideas, right?
100%.
And yeah, it's the execution that's the hard one often. There's a lot of
Yeah.
ideas out there. But
It's also the most painful to do, and it's the least sexy. Like,
mm,
no one wants to. Founder. I'm a big proponent of founder culture in general. I think it is really encouraging for people to go and do their own things and at least try it. Um, but no one shows you the 10,000 emails you have to send to get investment, and that's not like an
mm,
exaggeration. When we did our seed round for YASO, my second business, that's 800. We spoke to 800 angels,
mhm,
150 plus VCs, and you can imagine that's like almost 1,000 people. All the conversations you're having back and forth, you're literally sending 10,000 emails to get a funding round closed. No one wants to think that it's that hard. They think they can walk, pitch.
mm.
I've got an idea, and off we go. It's just never the case.
Yeah, and how many no's you get, and it, it almost kind of sounds sexy when you talk about it. It's like, well, yeah, you got over all those rejections, and you came out stronger. But it's really hard when you're going through those rejections. You're
For
like, man,
sure.
maybe my idea sucks. Maybe maybe this is not so good, right?
So I think actually when it comes to I don't think that there are okay no there are bad ideas. I'm not getting wrong. However, if you've like conceptualized something, tested it, and have a few people liking it that are completely outside of your circle, I think it's much more about approach and just like resilience to the no's.
Mm,
Because when most people say I don't know your idea, I don't like your idea, or it's a no, we had this with raising for the second business. I'll come on to like what that is and why it was the case. They're not
yeah.
really saying no. What they're saying is, I'm not smart enough to assess this correctly, but I'm not going to tell you I don't think I'm smart enough. So I'm just going to pass because that's the easiest thing to do.
Mm,
And
that's
subsequently, after coming back and
mm.
speaking to these investors, it's exactly what they said. They were like, I just don't have the skills to evaluate this. So it's just easier to say no. But they're never going to say, like, I don't know enough about it because it makes them seem stupid. And everyone needs to
Yeah.
keep face in this game.
Yeah, that's true. And obviously, you spent so much more time thinking about it, researching it, testing it, right? The investor has a quick look at it, basically, and then they understand as much as they do. And yeah, it's easy to overemphasize that feedback you get from investors, because you feel like they're experienced, but yeah, at the same time, nobody thought about it as much as you did, right?
Exactly.
So when you talk about Pouch, what were those first steps? You mentioned, testing now, and how did you guys start actually? How did you guys All right, before we continue, I want to take a second to talk about our sponsor. I've always been saying that one of the best ways to learn about business is by working closely with a smart and successful entrepreneur, and this might be your opportunity. Our sponsor is a company called Judge Me. Judge Me is a Shopify product review plugin, and they're the number one plugin on Shopify. They're literally, if you look at the Shopify App Store, they're in the first spot. They're bootstrapped, and they managed to outcompete other companies that raised hundreds of millions of dollars by just being smarter and building a better product. They were started by PJ, who was also a guest on the Founders Lounge, episode 54, so I recommend you to check it out. They recently moved their headquarters to London, and they're looking for smart people to join them. They're looking for product managers, engineers, and they're looking to fill other roles as well. So check out careers.judge.me and see if you find any role that you like and apply. So that's careers.judge.me. Now enjoy the rest of the episode.
So Ben had the idea, came to me and was like, great, let's pursue this. Well, neither of us know how to write code or build a tech product. We need to find a developer of some kind. So we went to look at some development agencies, but we didn't have any money really to spend 10 grand to get to an MVP. We just didn't have the capital to do that. And then we found some freelancers and we thought, okay, what's the minimum viable product that we need here? And again, couldn't find anyone. And then I think this comes to being open and talking about your ideas. Just on the tube home, and I bumped into a friend from school, and she said, "How are you?" And rather than being very British and saying, "Yeah, fine, everything's great," I told her the truth, which was, "Oh, I'm actually really frustrated. We've got what we think is a great idea. We need someone to build this." She says, "That's so funny. I work at a development agency, like a digital agency. One of my developers has said he's trying to work on his own side project. I should introduce you." In London, this guy lived a 5-minute walk away from me. Just crazy. And his name was Vikram. He became our third equal co-founder. And when we met him, we initially wanted to pay him a small amount to build this. And on I think the third meeting, I said to him, "Look, I don't want to pay you anymore. I want you to become our full third co-founder." And he said, "Good, I'm glad you said that, because actually I was going to say no in this meeting unless you offered me the co-founder role." So, the stars were aligned in terms of motivation and what we wanted. So then we had our third co-founder. We had Vic, and we built the product throughout 2016 and launched it in September 2016 up when we got onto this accelerator program called Mass Challenge. It's big in America. It doesn't exist in the UK anymore. They never took equity. It was more like a ESG, social good accelerator, but we got free office space and mentoring for 3 months, so it was good for us. Launched the product, raised £113,000 in angel funding, mainly from one angel, that a German guy that Vic's kid went to school with him and met him in the car park and had it struck it off. So you just never know where you're going to meet people. Yeah. It's a crazy story. Then with that, we could pay for servers, we could start doing some initial marketing tests. All went pretty poorly, to be honest, but the product was quite novel, and we got in a lot of, I'll say, the money-saving press.
Yeah, no, keep going. Yeah.
Okay, so that gave us, so we got into a lot of the money-saving press, and that got us some initial interest. And then we got contacted by the BBC saying, "Do you want to go on Dragon's Den?" And I say we built and sold a company of 15 minutes of TV. And I truly say this, we would have been nowhere without it. We had finance and ops skills, we had sales skills, we had technical skills, but we actually didn't have the core skill we needed, which was someone that knew digital marketing really well. We just didn't have that skill set. And we paid some agencies to try and help us, but they're all terrible. No one, they never worked with the browser extension before. We got taken for an absolute ride. So the Dragon's Den experience was amazing. We went through the whole revision.
Tell a little bit more about that. So obviously it's a big deal.
Yeah, it was a massive deal. So what happens is you do an application process, and because we got scouted, because we were in Forbes, some random article, we got scouted, we got accelerated through the process, and you have an interview, you have a phone call, and then you go and do like a screen test in White City in London, where BBC's office is, and then they say, great, you're going to be on the show. All of the application happened in February, March, and then we recorded the episode in May, and the entire year just became about like doing well on Dragon's Den, and then capitalizing on the launch. So when I say doing well on Dragon's Den, we kind of stopped all spending and said, if we nail this, we will succeed. If we don't, we're dead in the water. So we've got to do everything we can. We hired pitch coaches. We went to like every smart person we know to get absolutely drilled on what could happen in the room to make sure that we knew the numbers and nothing could go wrong. Yeah, we pitched on, I remember it well, in Manchester on May 7th, 2017. And we got 5 offers. So every single dragon wanted to invest, which was at the time, yeah, like now it happens quite a lot. But at the time, we were only the third. In 15 years, we were the third time this has happened.
Oh, wow.
And one of the crew came up to us afterwards and said, that's the best pitch I've ever seen. So, we went to the green room after and we were just like buzzing. Like we just couldn't believe how well it had gone. And you're going to be the big slot. And then it was a case of like, well, we just have to wait. So we recorded in May and the series kicks off in August. But we could have been on TV anytime from August through to October or November. Yeah. So it was kind of tools down waiting. But we quite quickly got told we were going to be the opening episode of the show. And it was a case of, right, what do we need to do technically wise? We need to hire a team. We went and raised money. So just before we went on the Den, we agreed a deal with our investor, our big angel, to put in some more money. And we agreed the valuation, said, no matter what happens on the show, we're going to agree this and you're going to invest at this amount. Basically hedged ourselves. Mm-hmm. We lost the hedge, but we got the good result because if we'd waited till after, we could have got better valuation. However, we then went and raised another 185,000 from some other angels to see us through the show to hire the team we needed. And we were making about £1,000 a month before going on the Den, which is obviously nothing. And then the first month after, we went up 12x to like £12,000 the first month. So we were like, this is amazing. It just shows you what some scale can do. Yeah. And effectively from there, we had an amazing 6 months, and the Black Friday and everything was amazing. But we came into January not having raised enough in the summer before the Den, not really knowing how to acquire users properly because we'd just been on a TV show. We still hadn't run those experiments to learn how to get users through various channels, all these other things. So we were like, okay, we need to really learn how. We've got traffic and users. Now let's learn how this business works. Let's make sure we measure everything.
Traffic and users, did that come primarily just from the PR? So people just heard about you through Dragon's Den and they came to your website, downloaded the extension, or is there anything more that happened around that?
So on the night, I think we went from 3,000 users to maybe 45,000 users.
Wow.
And yeah, it was incredible. You just can't buy that level of PR like separately or advertising. And then we used, like, as seen on Dragon's Den, to run Facebook ads. This is in the glory days still, 2017, getting like £1 or £2 installs, but we weren't spending a lot of money. And then we were in a bit more press, but we got a big bump and then it just died down. And actually our product had a lot of improvements to make. There was quite a few bugs, so we had quite a high churn rate that we only realized in January when we put in all these tools and measures that we could now afford and had data to use. So we kind of ran before we could walk, and it hurt us for sure. But we dealt the hand we were given.
That is crazy because it's so funny. It's those 15 minutes, or not even 15 minutes, just a few minutes that you get on the TV, right? But it's literally, as you said, the whole year. Before that and after that, the whole year is literally just around Dragon's Den.
Yeah, that was our full focus.
Everything.
Getting on, preparing, doing well, preparing for the TV airing, dealing with the traffic and everything that came afterwards. Right? It's a whole year thing. And yeah, we had a really good September, October, November, December, because we had like maximum users, but also it was the shopping season, the golden quarter. And we didn't realize quite how big Q4 was in terms of retail. It's like triple, quadruple the other months. And so, we thought we're going to keep going up, and we hired some people, and come Jan and Feb, instead of like 20 grand a month we were doing, we went down to like 6. So, and then we were having user churn. And so actually we got in a bit of a death spiral because we thought we were doing really well. We planned to do well, and then things started reversing. So all of 2017 was Dragon's Den, make the most of it. All of 2018 was just trying to survive and figure out what to do with this business. And the error I think I made in hindsight was not believing how big this thing could be. Like, I know it sounds crazy, but unless you read all, and nowadays, like, there's so much content like this podcast where people that have never run a business before can hear stories like this and understand like how scale can work, like what lots of traffic can really do, how things can quickly ramp up. I worked in finance before. I had no idea really how the internet worked and how many people are using it and how you could direct that traffic. And the point I make is, if I had known how big this thing could have been, I would have raised, or if I knew how to, I would have raised a lot more money just before going on Dragon's Den. We raised 180 because it was like, okay, we should have raised like £1 million. And we probably could have, but we just didn't know how. Like, I never raised from VCs before. But come January, we tried to do a funding round, and we were, wanted a much bigger valuation because we were making money and all the rest. And they said, oh no, Series A numbers, you need $1 million of revenue. Come back when you're doing 70 grand a month. And we're like, we're just never going to get there. So we were like in this rock and a hard place. We don't have enough money to grow. And if we spend all that money in like a couple of months, the business may just die. So yeah, then some very interesting things happened that ended up resulting in our sale.
That's such a great example of the whole entrepreneurial roller coaster that people often talk about. It's like from the highest high to the lowest low within a few months, right? Literally, going from the best possible scenario to then just trying to survive.
Yeah, I thought in October 17, I was like, I'm going to be a multimillionaire. To Feb 18 being like, it's all like, it's going to go to crap overnight. Yeah,
it's great. And sometimes that kind of that contrast happens between the morning and the evening in one day, right? Sometimes you wake up and you're like, oh my God, this is going to be the next unicorn. And then by the time you go to bed, you're like, literally everything's crashing down and we're not going to survive.
Yeah. And I think that having that experience quite young, you build a certain amount of resilience, which has served me very well to today.
Yeah, so that's actually an interesting question. But maybe we'll get to that towards the end. I'm curious what else. I agree with that statement a lot, and I think that's the kind of resilience that it gives you, just for life, right? It's not just for business. I think it just makes you more resilient, stronger, and it gives you a lot of other useful skills and traits in life as well. But so.
Sure.
To finish the story of Pouch, so then what happened? Then you guys sold, and you said there were some reasons, right, why you went for the sale.
So we couldn't raise from VCs. We couldn't grow the business, so we had to look for like almost a corporate partner that could do something with Pouch. And the News UK that own in the United Kingdom, the Sun, the Times, those newspapers, they were looking for startups that could help their users save money, but they could invest in, but they could also grow with their properties. So like, this is perfect for us, right? Like, we help people save money, we can get loads of traffic from their website, and we can give them a revenue share on every user they give us. Match made in heaven. And we went through this process with them. It's like a 3-month process. We kind of put all our eggs in this basket and went through the process, had to do these technical assessments, commercial assessments, meet everyone in the business. I think we met everyone as senior in the business apart from Rupert Murdoch. And they agreed they were going to invest £1 million in the business at a £5 million valuation. But really, like, it would have been a quasi acquisition because after having them on the cap table, no one else was really going to look at you. But we were comfortable with it. We were like, they'll buy us at some point. We'll know we'll do well with the money. We'll spend £1 million on other channels, but they'll give us lots of free traffic. So win-win. What happened is these big corporates, they're not set up to make investments. And the reason they aren't is because ultimately, like, you've got a VC firm, your job is to invest. and you write your investment memos, and if it goes wrong, no one's really going to tell you off because everyone has agreed to invest in the business through your process as a VC. With a big corporate, someone on the exec team has to hang their hat on the deal, say, I believe in this. Now, we had spent like maybe max half an hour with each C-suite person. Why would they risk their super cushy job on a very risky investment when they're not seeing any personal upside from it? The company is making it. And so they said, no, we're not doing any investments anymore. So they wasted our time for 3 months. They wasted their time for 3 months. It was a nightmare. Like, we really thought the business was going to collapse. We had to fire all the staff apart from one. So we went from like 9 people to 6 people, actually. The 3 co-founders, 2 developers, and 1 marketing guy. It was so painful. But what happened was News UK put out a press release that they were working with us. And what they wanted to do was build a version of Pouch, a white labeled version of Pouch for the Sun Savers browser extension. That's what we were able to do. They put out this press release and the Daily Mail saw it. And the Daily Mail actually have one of the largest voucher code websites in the UK. And it's run by a company called Global Savings Group, who, as their core business, run white labeled voucher code websites. Global Savings Group reached out to us, said, we'd like to speak to you. And we said, we can't. We're in a process with the Sun for investment. We can't speak to you. After the process finished, we reached back out and said, we can have a conversation. And we met their CEO. And he was like, tell us about yourself. I was like, being transparent, we've just had a massive hit. We're just trying to figure out what to do next. We've got a great product. It's working, but we just need to figure out. We thought the Global Savings Group wanted to invest in us. We were like, great. We did technical sprints and all the rest. And they said, we want to do a test with you. And we just said no. We've just done it with the Sun. We don't have it in us again. We can't do this. And we went to Munich, where the head office is, and we met the whole team. Basically, it was an investor day. And at the end of the thing, they said, we want to buy you. We don't want to invest in you. We want to acquire the business. They had this very complicated structure with this whole test that I just mentioned. I'm getting the timeline a little confused. Ultimately, they said, we want to do something simple. And then what they proposed to us was very confusing. And the CEO called me and said, look, if you don't want to do this test, we can't move forward. And on the spot, I convinced him that he was looking at this wrong. And if they simplify it and do the rest, we'll reduce the valuation and they can buy the business for cash. And the number I said on that call was pretty much the number they ended up buying the business at, give or take a few K. So after we agreed that they would buy us, I think from first meeting to full acquisition took 3.5 months, which is very fast.
Which is pretty fast, yeah.
Yeah. Fortunately, I had a background in corporate finance, so I knew how to drive a process forward.
So that was helpful.
Very helpful. Didn't have to pay any advisors. I think we spent $7,000 on legal fees for the whole deal, and that was it.
Which is incredible. Yeah.
Oh, it was great. It was great. And GSG bought the business. We didn't really have any other options. We could have gone and raised some more money, but I think that in the journey I've given you, it's such a roller coaster. We were exhausted. It'd been 2 years. We'd never run a business before. Hiring, firing, growing, failing, all these things. And I think we were just grateful we had a clean exit. Now, we didn't make a lot of money. It was a 7-figure deal.
Yeah.
I made enough to make it financially worthwhile, me leaving a corporate job and doing this, let alone all the experience and the fun and all the rest. Made more than I would have in any normal job over those 2 years. But I was just happy to have a clean exit. And we always said to each other, it's not about this one, it's about the next one. And all 3 of us since, I've got a new business, Ben's got a new business. Vikram actually stayed at GSG. He's been there almost 5 years now. He's their top technical lead. He was a bit older, had a kid. He didn't want to go start something else straight away. And it was a really happy story. And I think it's almost a classic founder tale where you've got all these ups and downs. We just got the fairy tale that we got an exit at the end of it rather than a failure, because there's so many points along the way. Dragon's Den didn't work. Even if News UK had actually decided to invest in us, I think we would have failed eventually because they were such a mess to deal with. And then, if the GSG CEO had called Ben or Vic, maybe they wouldn't have given the same response. Maybe we wouldn't have sold the business. It's just crazy when you kind of line it all up and how it works.
I love this so much because, as you said, it's kind of a classic story with all the ups and downs, some crazy ups and some crazy downs, and then in the end, a reasonable success, right? It's not $100 million exit, but it's, you sold the business at profit. That's it's still like 99% of startups never actually sell, right?
We beat the
You
stats.
fail. So,
we beat the stats. We raised money on our first attempt, and we sold a business on our first attempt. And I don't know any other founders that have done that. I don't think we did anything necessarily special. Like, I can very much point to our point of failures, but we had real grit and determination, and we weren't going to let it go easily.
And again, also in a relatively short period of time, right? I mean, that's 2 years to a 7-figure exit, which is, I think that's very decent. That's very, very good.
For sure. And it was low 7 figures, right? It was just, let's just say just 7 figures. But TechCrunch doesn't need the exact number.
Yeah, exactly. It's the million that everyone talks about, right? It's all about that, reaching that million. That's what we all want to hear.
Exactly.
Then 1 year later, Honey sells for $4 billion. How was that? Was Honey was that like when that story came out? Was Honey a company that you guys followed? Did you kind of learn from them? Was that like, oh my god, we could have done so much better? Or like, how did you feel about that? So Honey, sorry for interrupting, but Honey was essentially the same thing, but in the US, I think.
Yeah. Right? So they, by the time we started, they already had about 2 million users. So America's a very different market in lots of ways. And the channels they had to grow were completely different to ours. A lot of the YouTubers they worked with were, they were American users before anything. Reddit was a big channel over there. And we followed them very closely. Look, PayPal overpaid massively, but doesn't matter. They got the exit they needed to at a time when markets were hot. So so I know that our lifetime value was like £15, right? That's what we went for. PayPal paid £200 per user, right? That's what they paid. So do I think Honey were 6x or whatever X better at monetization? No, 12x better at monetization than us. No, I don't think they were. So I think PayPal overpaid. However, did they get like a tool and lots of user data and all these other things? Yeah, they did. Do I regret it? No, because we did what we think that was right at the time. And I know other browser extension businesses have raised a lot more money than us that can't find an exit because everyone's like saturated and got their own. So maybe we would have never sold. What it did do is convince GSG to invest a lot more in the pouch project. So we sold at the start of 19. Honey sold at the end of 2019, and the reason they bought us was to build all these white label browser extensions for Daily Mail and all the rest, which we did for the same reason as the Sun. They weren't getting the traffic that we thought they would. And after Honey acquired PayPal acquired Honey, it was like, wow, we made a really good decision buying this business. Let's put more resources into it. And so suddenly I've gone from, our team of 6, we hired a few more people. It was, here's a new budget, multi-million-pound budget every year, hire your own team, really see how far this thing can go. And so I basically had my Series A experience, but in, a very safe environment. We scaled the team from 6 to 30. We 10x the revenue over a 2-year period. So I was at GSG for 3 years, 19, 20, 21. 10x the revenue over that period, 10x the user base, and had a fantastic experience. So I wasn't, my deal with them, I didn't have to stay. I could have left after 6 months, maybe less. I stayed because I genuinely liked what we were doing, and I hadn't had enough of growing Pouch, but they gave us a really good structure to enable us to do it and incentives to do it if we did well.
Nice. Great. So really good story in the end. And then, so now you went on to start YASO. What is that, a year or 2 years ago? Am I pronouncing that correctly?
You are pronouncing it correctly. So YASO, we started it in 2022, But the first year was just raising money. That's all we did. So,
so that's interesting. How do you start something with raising money? I think that might be surprising to a lot of people.
I think so. So the idea for YASO is not like an overnight idea. My two co-founders, Adam and James, I met them 10 years ago at a conference. So I actually studied economics and Chinese at university and lived out in China for a while. And I always found it a fascinating place in terms of like the market size, the technology is just crazy. And Adam and James did Chinese at university as well. And they started a marketing agency just focused on helping Western brands market to Chinese consumers. After Pouch got sold, Adam got in touch with me because their agency was under acquisition offer. But they had bootstrapped this business to a few million in revenue, just the two of them, no investors, from their bedroom in university. They didn't have a founder network. They were like, I don't know if this is a good deal or not. It wasn't a good deal. We advised them not to do it, and they didn't do it, but started looking under the hood of their agency, and they had this really interesting e-commerce business or e-commerce product that they had built, bootstrapped from agency cash flows. Might be quite hard to explain, but there's an app in China called WeChat, which is like WhatsApp on steroids. You can not only message all your friends, you can pay your tax, you can order food. It's like a whole ecosystem. And you can also buy products directly through it. And they had built an integration between Magento, which is an e-commerce framework now owned by Adobe, and WeChat. So they could actually set up stores for Western brands on WeChat. Mm-hmm. I was like, this is the future. This is the leverage. This is the scale move. And they already had some brands using it. But if we went out and raised money as the agency, VCs would be confused. We're like, we're investing in an agency, but you've got this tech product. What's the valuation? What do we do? So throughout 21, we kind of conceptualized, okay, if this was a standalone e-commerce business, I did this, on evenings and weekends. If it was a standalone e-commerce business, what would this look like? How would it work? What are the tools we'd be using? How much money do we need? We realized that it wasn't something we could bootstrap. It either works or it doesn't. We can either help Western brands sell their products into China directly and have all the right systems and everything in place, or we can't. So we knew that we need to raise quite a lot of money as a starting point. Mm-hmm. But we had 10 years of agency data, an MVP that had been sold to brands to back it up. So we went, it was a brand new company with a brand new idea. And actually, because of how the market's turned, investors discounted a lot of that previous work. They were like, what have you built now? And we knew we had to raise at least 1.2 million pounds to get going. If we didn't raise that, just from like knowing the costs involved, there would be no point. If we raise any less, we're not going to hit our goal. We're just going to waste it. We won't unlock that next level of funding. So that's why we started the business without, saying we need to raise money, because we knew that we had to. There was no bootstrap situation that we could have. So it was just a real slog. Yeah.
And what was so I actually had the somewhat similar experience with my previous business, the startups that I started in 6, maybe 7 years ago in Switzerland. And we also raised without having anything, basically just a pitch deck and arguably a good idea and some relevant experience. Basically, that's what we pitched with, and I think we had a good fundraising strategy as well, and that helped us raise funding. But I'm curious. It's generally difficult to do that, and it got more difficult over the last 2 or 3 years, right? So how did you manage to do it? Obviously, you mentioned before you had to reach out to literally hundreds of investors.
Yeah.
But what else was important in that process?
Just not stopping. and what I said earlier about investors saying no, but really they just don't understand it. We are in our pitch, right? We are having to explain the dynamics of a massive market and how it works. And then we need to explain why what we're doing is better than what's currently in the market. So it's a massive education piece. And these associates at VC firms, like they don't know anything about Chinese e-commerce. Why would they? It's not necessarily their focus as generalists. It's seen as quite an intimidating market. You need to understand the language and everything else. And so most people pass because they said, I don't know anything about this. If it's a B2B SaaS product, they've got, you've seen the SaaS napkin where you can literally like score a company on metrics and everyone uses the same score. So you can rank yourself almost like a percentile wise. You can't do that with something like Chinese e-commerce because no one knows what it is. So we had to spend a lot of time educating people and then a lot of time convincing them that we were right in our theory of what we were going to build. There were two things that helped a lot, or three. One is the fact I'd exited before and had learned a lot and really scaled Pouch. So there was a level of credibility that got me in through the door and had people listen to me, even if they didn't understand the idea necessarily. And when I say the value of selling Pouch, that was the true value. The doors it opened to me when I send someone a TechCrunch article and they're like, well, this guy's clearly serious. Let's have a conversation. The second thing was the data that we had from the previous business. Like we launched 120 brands via the agency. We knew all the players. We knew all the tools. Like we had the tech stack nailed down, and we had priced it up, saying this is what we need to build it. It will work. The third thing was we pre-sold the product. We didn't actually sign contracts, but we didn't have case studies because it was the case studies we had on the previous MVP got discounted because it was a different model. So investors said, maybe 2 years ago we'd count these, but the market's changed. Sorry. So what we had to do was sell to companies before we had a live product. And whilst we didn't sign any contracts, because there was no point until the product was live, we had companies that believed and wanted to use our service so much that they would get on calls with investors and tell them why we were solving their problem and why they would work with us down the line. And having that advocacy as a company that doesn't have a product, but you're speaking, got the head of a brand category at a £200 million brand saying, I know the problem they're solving, I want to use their solution, is super powerful and worth, so much in terms of credit in the bank with these investors who just want to see some proof points.
Mm-hmm. Can you maybe talk about that a little bit more? Because I think I've heard it that often, right? Especially with SaaS. Yeah. People say, well, if you're solving a big enough problem, you should just go out and pre-sell it. And that's how you kind of fund the development. That was an idea 10 plus ago. And that sounds really good, but also I think it can be really difficult, right? Because and I think it probably got more difficult now than it was maybe some years ago. So did you guys, again, maybe did you get a lot of rejections, or how did you actually approach that? How did
so we just started reaching out to brands saying this is what we do, and then when we sold it as if it was live, and when we got the right people on the phone, we said, look, we're actually fundraising, like we want to build this. I know that it will solve a certain problem set for you. Will you help us raise the money? Will you be in our due diligence calls with the investors? Some people said no. Other people said yes. You can only ask. But I think the difference with SaaS products is there's enough tools now where you can get basic feedback and information for like very little. Like it doesn't cost a lot to build an MVP. There are tools like Bubble and all the GPT integrations you can do nowadays. But with ours, it was binary. Either you can like take product and get it into China via e-commerce channels, or you can't. So we really had to pre-sell the vision to people. And, some of those people we spoke to back then are customers today. So it did work, fundamentally, both in the investment and actually getting them as brands.
So in this case, it was clearly a problem, and you guys had a unique idea that those brands were like, yeah, we do need that, and we genuinely want to support you in that.
Exactly. It wasn't because the idea had been born out of 10 years of experience and a previous MVP. We knew very clearly that the problem existed and that you needed a very special set of skills to solve it. So we knew we'd be able to find those brands that could be our advocates for the funding round. And they were really important. Like, I don't think we would have raised the round without them.
And then you ended up raising £2 million or so, right?
We raised 2 million pre-seed. So pre-revenue, pre-product, just an idea. We actually got 3 million of commitments in the end, because once we got our lead and Playfair Capital, the floodgates opened. Every conversation is like, it's nice to meet you. We're about to close. If you want to put in, I'll try and squeeze you in. That was the best 2 weeks ever, and everyone bang, 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 bang. And I tried to bottle that confidence for the next round. Like, what's that vibe that, because I could have been lying, right? I wasn't, but what's that vibe that I was giving off that people would be like, when someone tells you no, you want to give them their money even more.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That's the fundraising situation that every founder wants to be in, right? When that's incredible.
7 months of struggle for 2 weeks of joy. That's basically it.
Nice. And so how's it going now? So that's been what has it been, a year or so since you raised? I'm not
Yeah,
entirely
about
sure actually when it was.
13, 14 months, around close in November. 14 months. Last year was really hard, I have to say. I think, we sell to brands that want to grow. And when funding dries up and economy in the UK is not looking good, people don't want to commit to big, like multi-year deals. We signed 3-year contracts. And our business model, we earn a revenue share of anything we sell through our solution, up to like 50%. So it's like very high, but we know the value that we bring, so why people sign with us. It took us a long time to get our first brand signed. We had to convince them of the idea. You don't have any case studies. How much is it going to cost me? Why should I trust you? All these things. But now we've got the first few. It's becoming a lot easier. And also, I do think that the market is changing in a way that people are confident and ready to grow again. Interest rates have stopped going up. People think they're going to come down. There are new funding rounds coming out. People are spending again. It's not as much doom and gloom as we had seen previously.
What's the long-term goal with YASO?
So we want to be able to help any brand from any place in the world to sell in China using our social commerce solution. So an ideal situation is in 5 years, we're working with 100 to 200 of top global consumer brands running their China business, doing anywhere from 1 to 4 billion of revenue, because that's how big the market. That's how big you can grow a business in China, because the market's just so big. China's e-commerce market is not just the biggest market in the world. It is bigger than every single other market combined, and it's one single place to be. It's crazy. The Western news filter on China is not good. Unfairly, I think so, because everyone says, political risk, all these other things. The biggest risk our business has faced so far is SVB collapsing with all our seed money in it, right? That's the biggest risk we've had. So I get quite frustrated when people talk about political risk, because China's open for business. Like, the West just doesn't want to believe it.
Interesting.
Yeah,
that's definitely a different narrative that we usually hear, right?
For sure.
Interesting. And that makes it a massive opportunity. That I'm looking forward to seeing how this evolves and how it goes. Very, very, very cool.
Fantastic.
So we talked a little bit about resilience before, which obviously, you said you build up your resilience throughout the first business. It seems like that's certainly helping you now with the second business, reaching out to all these investors and, just keep going. What are some other lessons, maybe either lessons that you're taking from the first business, maybe things that you're doing the same because that works so well, or maybe even more importantly, what are you doing differently now?
It's a great question. I think I'll start with like what I tell anyone that I advise or work with, or my founders, whatever it may be. When things are going bad, often you spend a lot of your time thinking about the fact that things are going bad. Right? You're just focused on, this has happened. I'm guilty of it. I'm an overthinker. The thing I learned is that if you can really unemotionally play out your worst case scenario and be okay with that scenario, then you are freed from that scenario and you can just focus on pushing things along. To give you an example, if YASO failed, I would have wasted a couple of years. I would have lost some people some money, and I would have to go get a normal job. Life's very long. You've got to have lots of opportunities. Like, it's a lot longer than you think. Everyone that invested understood the risks and trusts us. And I know hand on heart that I will put blood, sweat, and tears into trying to make this thing a success. And if it doesn't, it's not through lack of trying. And if I wasn't doing this, I'd be having a normal job anyway. So whilst I'd be devastated if it failed, I'm not held back by that fear. And it lets you just keep going and keep going and keep going, because you're not worried about what if it goes wrong, what if it goes wrong. And I learned that, when we're trying to sell Pouch, I was like, well, what's the worst thing that happens here if we don't buy the company, if we don't sell the business? Well, We do 15K a month. There's 3 founders. We fire everyone. We each earn a passive income of £5,000 a month. Not bad. Go on and build our life with a great experience and having gone on a TV show. Okay, cool. I can deal with that. Fine. Now we can just push on. And I think a lot more people need to think about the worst case scenario, get comfortable with it, and just move on. What have I done differently in this business compared to the last one? I understand our systems a lot better. I think we're just a lot more professional in how we act. I'm not that bothered about playing startup founder. We don't really go for drinks in the week. I'm at events when I need to be to meet people. I post on LinkedIn because I know it's good for personal brand for investors. But I do podcasts like this because you've had great guests and I respect you. But it's a case of not really playing that game, not being an entrepreneur. Just we've got an idea, let's focus and execute and block out the distractions. Whereas with Pouch, I think because it was the first time, I think we got a lot more press because it was a B2C startup. It was a consumer business. A lot of people I knew used it. When I went out for drinks, I found the Pouch. I used that. Amazing. Cool. It was a bit more ego. That's been completely removed in this one. It's just, we're going to build an amazing business. If I'm known, amazing. If I'm not, I don't care. Let's just build what we can.
Amazing. I have to say, I love how raw and real you are with everything that you're saying. I think it's one of the most just real conversations that I've had in a while.
I'm glad.
Because a lot of people just try to paint a nicer picture, or that they kind of try to appear like they're honest, but you can tell that there's more to it. But I don't know, it's you really give me the feeling that you're just saying things as they are. Some of them are good, some of them are not as good, some of them might seem good, but actually for yourself, when it's actually happening to you, you feel like it was not as good as it could have been. So I really appreciate that. I know you need to run to your next meeting, so we can wrap up here. I will say, for everyone who listened until the end, I'm on a mission this year to get this podcast to the top 5% of the most shared podcasts globally. We were in the top 15% a year ago, but I think now we have better guests. I'm hopefully better at asking questions. So if you're listening, please do help me and either send it to somebody who wants to listen to this kind of conversation, or just subscribe, give the algorithm what it needs, and I'll really, really appreciate that. And then we'll get even more real, honest guests like Jonny on the podcast. And thank you so much, Jonny. Really appreciate it. It was really
pleasure, and thanks for having me on. And I know you're going to hit your goal. You're a great interviewer, and really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you so much. Take care.